Hey guys, how's it going? It's Al. If you're preparing for your season-long fantasy leagues, this is the video for you. I've got some mid-round wide receivers that I think can provide massive value with the possible upside of being wide receiver ones on the year, being guys that finish in the top 12 at the position. A lot of these guys have some similarities between them. You're going to notice them as we go down the list. Wide receiver is a very easy position to find breakouts. They are very... if you look back and do the history, if you do the research at it, you'll find a lot of correlation between things that lead to those breakout seasons. And I've got the guy that's done the work here with us today. His name's JJ Zachariason, the late round quarterback. You know him from numberFire and the FanDuel Podcast Network, his multiple podcasts, the Late Round Podcast and Living the Stream, and all of his lovely, lovely work that he does across the fantasy football industry. JJ, how are you doing today, man?
I'm good. I'm not good. I'm great.
You're great. You are great.
I'm great.
I was expecting fine. Usually you just say, I'm fine. This is fine.
Yeah, look, I'm a content person. I'm usually fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
There's nothing wrong with fine. But I think that the wide receivers we're going to talk about on this video today are more than fine. In fact, I thought at the end of last football season, as we approached the playoffs, I was thinking forward on stream about how deep the wide receiver position was going to be for 2020 drafts. And currently it does not disappoint, because we're going to talk about some guys with an ADP of the 5th round or later that you can get that have some massive upside. And the first one that I want to talk about is DK Metcalf. Absolute stud, led all wide receivers in end zone targets last year with 18 of them, according to PFF, had an ADOT higher than Odell Beckham Jr. and AJ Brown, two guys who might have had more yards per route run or anything else in terms of that. He's got an ADP of 56, which to me seems ridiculously low as the 20th wide receiver off the board with as much upside as you're getting here. Now look, wide receivers, if they're getting... People look at red zone targets, and red zone targets are valuable for sure. Inside the 10 targets, even more valuable. But those targets that come in the end zone, the most valuable target that you can get, because all they have to do is catch the ball and you get 6, plus 1 for the PPR, plus the yardage, obviously. And then guys that can be game breakers and get down the field. So they're targeting him deep down the field. They're targeting him in the end zone. The two biggest ways that you can have a breakout game. And he's got a really good floor with his target percentage carrying over from last year and a year more of maturity, playing with the great quarterback that he plays with. So with everything that I've got here, 56 as an ADP seems like an absolute steal to me for DK.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a competitive landscape at wide receiver, to be fair. So I can at least understand the ADP, but you nailed it with the end zone target stuff. You know, you're looking at not just a statistic that carries over and has a decent weight, but it predicts touchdowns at a pretty strong rate too. I like to look at yards versus touchdowns a lot just because it's a very quick and easy way to spot regression. But if you combine that with looking at end zone targets, you can really spot regression and see where guys should be scoring touchdowns and shouldn't be scoring touchdowns. And DK Metcalf, someone who should be able to maintain a high rate of scoring touchdowns because of where he's being targeted. The other thing too to keep in mind is that with Russell Wilson, he targets his wide receivers in the end zone a lot, like more at a higher rate than other quarterbacks do. So that's just another reason to like Metcalf, because that stickiness is there. You know, to me, if you like someone like Kenny Galladay, if you like my boy Babytron, he has the same type of overall analytical profile as DK Metcalf does, where you mentioned the high ADOT, you mentioned the end zone targets. Kenny Galladay last year was 3rd in the NFL in end zone targets. So if you're passing on a guy like Galladay, which I think Galladay is fairly priced, but if you're passing on a guy like Galladay because you want to get a running back and you want to go with a slightly more running back heavy approach to start the draft, I think Metcalf would be a good way of still kind of capturing the way that Galladay accumulates points, but with a different player who's a little bit cheaper.
And I like Metcalf for all of those reasons. I think he's viable in transactional leagues because you'll feel comfortable starting a guy who's getting the 8 targets a game or whatever that he gets. So you've got a really good floor with upside, and he's great for best ball because the boom weeks are going to be massive explosions, like nuclear weeks, like Mount St. Julio type weeks from DK Metcalf. If the one thing that's left for him to hurdle, in my opinion, is that catch rate. He's got to just catch the ball more often. But if that does happen, right, with maturity, with age, with experience at this level against NFL caliber cornerbacks, if that catch rate just goes up and improves somewhat, he's an absolute monster. The next guy I want to talk about, Terry McLaurin from the Washington Football Club. The 22nd wide receiver off the board with an ADP of 57. So right behind DK Metcalf. Unless you're picking at a turn, you're not going to come out of most drafts with both of these guys. So you got to pick either or. And to me, it's a coin flip, and I'm fine with both. 10 end zone targets for Terry McLaurin last year. We know how fast he is and can get downfield. I'm going to let you talk about the team pace upgrade that's happening in Washington with the change of the coaching staff. And he was 27th in the league in terms of ADOT, being targeted an average of 14.5 yards down the field. So big play threat, touchdown, realistic possibilities with the quarterback that he's played with before. So there's the Adam Levitan shower narrative in play here as well. So why don't you talk to me? I know that you're also high on Terry McLaurin, so go.
I am. I am. So I think Terry McLaurin can walk into a 25% target share in this offense. So
there's nobody else there.
There's really no one else there. And then Kelvin Harmon tears his ACL, so there's even less people there. So the one thing though with Washington, as you alluded to, Al, is that last season they ran the second fewest plays that we've seen any team run since 2011. So it's a Washington team with a new regime, a new staff. That's going to be more friendly in terms of volume in that offense. Natural regression tells us that they're going to run more plays. So if you liked what Terry McLaurin did last year, which he did fall off a little bit down the stretch, when he faced some tougher matchups, although he did come through in some really tough matchups too. But when he did face some tougher matchups, it wasn't butterflies and rainbows, but he was a rookie. He's a rookie wide receiver. One metric that I like to look at in terms of predicting volume the next season, aside from volume itself is very predictive year over year. But one is yards per team pass attempt. AJ Brown last year scored really well. He was third best in the NFL in yards per team pass attempt. Terry McLaurin, though, as a rookie, ranked 17th among all wide receivers. And that was in a really bad offense, in a bad situation in general, where he really was the only threat in that offense. So teams could focus on him a little bit. So I'm high in McLaurin, the talent. He should walk into volume. That volume should also be there more than it was last year. I think he's a great value right now.
And his ADP has come up to meet DK Metcalf. His ADP was in the mid 70s earlier in the year before the draft. It's climbed since the NFL draft till now. So these to me are coin flips. They've been coin flips the entire offseason. But the price has kind of changed on McLaurin over time as the last couple of months have gone on and people have kind of dug a little bit more into actually doing some drafting, real money drafting. Next guy I want to talk about, Michael Gallup from the Dallas Cowboys. Had 112 targets last year, 18.8% of the target market share on the Cowboys. ADP expectation for where he's being picked, and right now his ADP is about 79th, which is the 29th wide receiver off the board. ADP expectation for wide receiver being selected there is about 155 points. His projection right now is about 200 points, give or take, depending on which projection system you use. JJ, I know you do your own projections. He's somebody that, if he's projecting 50 points over ADP expectation at wide receiver here at a value that's 20 picks later than guys like DK Metcalf and Terry McLaurin, to me, an absolute standout value here. Clearly there's 166 vacated targets, but I don't think that they're going to go to guys like Amari Cooper. I don't even think that they're going to go to Michael Gallup. Obviously they drafted CeeDee Lamb to take up some of those targets, and Blake Jarwin steps into the venerable one, the dad runner of all dad runners, Jason Witten. He's going to just kind of usurp those 83 targets from him. But if Gallup picks up a few extra, if he goes from 112 to like 125, right? Just like a 10% increase in his overall targets, you're looking at a massive possibility of an increase at a very low price as a middle wide receiver 3 range in terms of his draft cost.
Yeah, I mean, think of it this way. So I have Gallup projected at 111 targets right now. Okay. And that's baked into, people are going to say, oh, they're not going to be as pass heavy next year. Well, that's all baked into my projections because I'm looking at regression when I'm building these projections. So, and that's with CeeDee Lamb in the offense, where a lot of people are worried about what CeeDee Lamb's going to do to Michael Gallup. CeeDee Lamb is going to play in the slot in Dallas, and it's a role that Randall Cobb had over a 14% target share in that offense last year, playing the slot. I do think CeeDee Lamb's better than Randall Cobb. Maybe he demands a little bit more. But Michael Gallup, from a numbers perspective per game, was essentially Amari Cooper last year. And no one wants to talk about that, it seems like, because of the ADP differential between Cooper and Gallup. So I have him right now, like I said, at 111 targets, and that's with them not being as pass heavy as they were last year. But there's that path to upside for Gallup, because you have to ask yourself, not only is he going to easily live up to ADP if that's the projection that kind of plays out, but what does happen if Amari Cooper gets banged up, which let's be real. Amari Cooper gets banged up.
Not out of the realm of possibility. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. What happens if Amari Cooper gets banged up? There's that fragility aspect where if one guy in that offense goes down, other guys are going to benefit in some way. And so if Michael Gallup is able to stay healthy, then like you mentioned, he can get up to that 125 target mark and then be a really, really, really solid wide receiver 2 to low end wide receiver 1 if things fall his way. But if they don't, then he's going to still live up to ADP.
Yeah. And another guy around that same ADP, Marquise Brown from the Baltimore Ravens, the 28th wide receiver being taken with an ADP of 72. Another coin flip spot for me, Michael Gallup versus Brown. Both are good downfield targets. I think that Gallup has more volume coming his way, more projectable volume coming his way based on offense, but the value of the targets that Marquise Brown gets are tremendous. Now, you've mentioned regression a few times. Obviously, regression is something that is extremely misunderstood by the broadest audiences, right? They hear the word regression, they hear regress, they think bad. Regression doesn't always mean bad. Regression means this is where things should live, and there are outliers above the expectation, there are outliers below. So if somebody is an outlier season that's below the expectation, they're going to come up. If somebody has an outlier season that's above the expectation, we would expect for them to regress to the mean. Regression can be positive, it can be negative towards whatever that expected mean is. Now, somebody like Marquise Brown, in my opinion, had an unrealistic amount of touchdowns per catches last year.
Sure.
The problem with expecting massive regression for something like that towards a mean is he plays in an offense with a quarterback that we really haven't seen before. So we don't know how that offense is going to regress, but maybe you can speak to that.
Yeah, so I do think there's going to be some passing touchdown regression hitting that offense, because Lamar Jackson had a 9% touchdown rate last year. Only one season in NFL history was better than that. Guys who have seen a touchdown rate of 8% or higher in NFL history generally see that fall by about 3% the following year. So Lamar Jackson, if we see him as at like a 6% touchdown rate, which is still good, still very high. If we were to see that, that would have been 12 fewer touchdowns through the air last year for Baltimore, which could have come via the ground. You know, they might have scored in different ways, but there is some touchdown regression coming for that offense. But I do think, you know, you mentioned the notion that they ran the ball a lot, so volume might not be there for Hollywood Brown. But 10 teams since 2011 have had a pass to rush attempt ratio of 0.9 or less. Of those 10 teams, so they were running more than they were passing it. Mm-hmm. Of those 10 teams, the following year they increased that pass to rush ratio by by an average of 0.22. So Baltimore is part of that group. Essentially what I'm saying is they're going to pass the ball more this year. Mm-hmm. You know, if you look at last season, they only ran 21% of their plays while trailing, which was by far the lowest rate in the league. So what this turns into is Hollywood Brown last season had a 17% target share in 14 games played. And he was banged up remember week 1, he played like 14 snaps and was able to find the end zone a few times.
He came into the season hurt with coming off surgery with the foot surgery for a speedster, which was expected to keep him from having a really great season. And that did not happen. Exactly.
So you're walking into a situation this year where his target share is going to be projected to be between 20 to 25%, let's say, because he's healthy, etc. But the one thing that's in his favor from a floor standpoint is that they should be more pass heavy than they were last year, not just based on the fact that Lamar Jackson might get better with his arm and they want to throw the ball a little bit more, but because of natural regression and the fact that Baltimore's likely not going to be as good as they were last year this year, because a lot of things have to go your way in order to be that good. So all of that. Then the other question you should be asking with Hollywood Brown is, he was so hyper efficient last year. Mm-hmm. What if he's just incredibly special?
Yeah.
What if Hollywood Brown is the Tyreek Hill type that we know what he does year over year should regress, but it's not going to regress the way that math would play out and show, right? So why can't Hollywood Brown, given what he did his rookie season, be part of that mold. So I'm really shooting for upside where you're drafting him. And I think that where you're drafting him, you're still getting a decent floor because of that target share in the offense.
See, that's more of what I'm saying, right? I'm saying that the regression monster may not be coming for somebody like Marquise Brown without a ton of volume because of the offense that he plays in, right? Because of the quarterback requiring at least one spy or defensive ends not just pinning their ears back and coming after him. They have to play contain a little bit more because safeties have to hold for that one beat because of that read option, because he may just be running and they have to hold, which allows a guy like Marquise Brown with his special skill set to get by and past and have a 5-yard cushion behind that cornerback where the safety can't recover. Maybe he is just going to be open more often than a normal wide receiver deep. So he has the ability, if Lamar can put the ball on target, which he did last year, for him to not really regress from a touchdown per catch perspective.
Yeah. I usually don't buy into guys like Hollywood Brown either. Like,
did you write Tyreek Hill regression articles?
Yeah, I mean, I did like 2 years ago.
That's what I mean. Like after his first year, like he caught 8 balls that were over 40 yards. Nobody's ever done that in the league before.
Yeah.
And then he did it again. It's like, well, guys, he's really good.
So I do think though that like with Hollywood, he could go down the path of being like a Deshaun Jackson, where he's a better real life player than fantasy player. Yes. Deshaun Jackson had some good seasons. Don't get me wrong. I mean,
but
he's still usable.
What he's done to what Deshaun Jackson did to quarterbacks,
right,
who played with him versus when they've played without him, is very tangible. Like he made them throw the ball down the field. He made them more efficient because of what he did in stretching out defenses. Right. I'm saying that Lamar has that effect on a wide receiver where Marquise Brown on a normal team may not have the numbers that he has playing for a team that ran the ball as much as they did last year, because his skill set and Lamar's skill set complement each other so very well.
Yeah. Right.
All right. So the darling of the fantasy community this offseason has been Deontay Johnson, the wide receiver 36 right now with an ADP of 102. So we've gotten a little bit later from those 70 ADPs. We're up into like the 9th and 10th rounds now. Deontay Johnson is stepping into a situation, and the problem with the way a lot of people look at fantasy leagues for 2020 or any year is they look at 2019 and they're going to look at the Steelers from last year and they're going to say, well, the Steelers last year sucked. And yeah, Ben's back, but Ben sucked. And Ben sucked kind of the second half of the year before. But he had surgery and fixed the problem, which was the reason why he sucked. And that offense was trash because... and I'm laying it on really thick because I know you're a Steelers fan. I feel your neck getting hot.
Thanks. Thanks, man.
The reason that happened was because quarterback play. So now you've got a Hall of Fame quarterback stepping back in with what, from all reports, is a fixed shoulder. And now they're sitting at a spot where they've still got Juju healthy. Connor's great. Offensive line is fine. System is still the same. And Deontay Johnson is... being drafted as a wide receiver 3, but in an offense that should take a big leap forward.
Yeah. So here's the way that I just generally view these players is I'm shooting for upside in this area of drafts because the opportunity cost isn't that high. I mean, the guy, a good example of this is Deontay Johnson versus Tyler Boyd. In terms of projectable output, Tyler Boyd might look better. And it wouldn't shock me at all if Tyler Boyd outscores Deontay Johnson this year. But we sort of know what Tyler Boyd is giving you at this point. We know the kind of role he plays, doesn't see end zone targets. I think he had 2 last year. We know that he's just not someone that's going to be, this locked and loaded top 10 wide receiver. Whereas that range of outcomes is there for Deontay Johnson. Last season, we talk up the rookie class, talked about DK Metcalf and Terry McLaurin. The guy who led all rookie wide receivers in receptions last year, Deontay Johnson. And that's with a circus, a clown show at the quarterback position. Just horrendous quarterback play. Deontay Johnson was still able to do that, had about a 19% target share in the offense. That's really translatable year over year. You love to see that volume. And when you're talking breakout wide receivers, they generally did see some sort of volume the previous season. They just weren't seeing, that 25% target share that you need in order to be a wide receiver 1. There's been a lot of talk too, that James Washington could be the breakout in this Pittsburgh offense. I don't mind James Washington as a late round dart throw by any means. But comparing the two is sort of an apples to oranges comparison, in my opinion, because you're looking at a rookie last year in Deontay Johnson versus a second year guy in James Washington. And then if you look at what they did in the draft in drafting Chase Claypool, who I thought was more of like a move tight end.
Mm-hmm.
But they're wanting to play him on the outside. His profile and what he does matches up a lot more to what they have or what they would want to have out of James Washington as opposed to Deontay Johnson. So I think there's some fear too that James Washington would lose his job in some way or lose some snaps to someone like Chase Claypool, whereas Deontay Johnson is locked in on that side of the field for Pittsburgh. So then the other thing too, within the breakout wide receiver study that I did, is that second year wide receivers. So age does matter. Younger players will break out at a higher rate than older ones, which is not surprising.
Unlike running backs.
Unlike running backs, it's not nearly as common with running backs, but it's very common at wide receiver. And then the more important thing is second year wide receivers break out at a much higher intensity than other wide receivers. So you might see the same number, let's say, or the same rate of third year wide receivers or fourth year wide receivers breaking out as second year wide receivers. But in the rate in which second year wide receivers really break out, it's pretty dramatic. There's a much higher intensity there in terms of getting those second year guys and seeing them far outperform their ADP. So to me, that's why I like Hollywood Brown, another second year guy. That's why we like DK Metcalf and Terry McLaurin. Deontay Johnson fits that mold. People might not have liked him that much as a prospect, but there were some good positive signs within his profile as a prospect. I think the community just kind of underrated him a little bit. I'm not saying that he's the next Antonio Brown, but he has that sort of feel to him. And if you watched him last year, his route running was out of control, especially for a rookie. So I'm very, very bullish on Deontay Johnson. I have him at wide receiver 31 right now, I think. So I'm fairly significantly higher than ADP.
Yeah, I mean, you have him where Tyler Boyd and AJ Green are, AJ Green being the wide receiver 31 and Tyler Boyd being the 32. So you have him basically up there, but you mentioned Tyler Boyd being drafted 25 spots ahead or 21 spots ahead of where Deontay Johnson is currently being drafted. So just a 2-round savings on a guy that we project to kind of have similar points. Now, another thing that you had mentioned for possible breakouts of wide receivers, like I said, there's a theme between all these guys. They're all second-year wideouts, which is a major theme. And also, the average QB ADP of that breakout wide receiver is the QB 19. So they don't need a great quarterback in order to do that. They just need opportunity. And as much as Deontay Johnson projects to be on the field this year, as you just outlined, that can happen. Another way that a wide receiver can break out is being on a bad team, because they're always behind and they have to throw. And so the last guy that we're going to talk about here is currently the wide receiver 52 being taken. 160 ADP. Preston Williams on a bad team. How much is quarterback play going to affect his possible breakout? Or is he just being drafted way too late versus what he can do when he's on the field?
I think he's just being drafted way too late. Like you already mentioned, the wide receiver breakout study that I did, there wasn't that strong of a correlation between wide receivers that broke out and the quarterback play that they had in terms of ADP. I think some of that might have to do with the fact that we're not the best at projecting everything. So if a wide receiver is breaking out, then that means the quarterback might also be breaking out, which means his ADP is a little bit depressed entering the season. So that could play a role in some way, but really what we're looking at with Preston Williams is he checks all the boxes. He saw before he was hurt last year, he had a 10% target share. So he had a prorated target share of 20% as a rookie, Al. People are just overlooking him because he was this undrafted guy. But the main reason he went undrafted was because of off the field stuff. It wasn't because of his actual play and his actual talent. Within my prospect model, which is heavily weighed towards college production, but there's predictability to it and it works and it's effective. But within my prospect model, he comes out as like a 40th or 50th percentile prospect. He's not like great, but that's because of him being undrafted. His production score within my prospect model was incredible. It was really, really good. So I think that you just combine all that. He's the de facto number 2 or 3, if you want to throw Gesicki in there, target within this offense. And it's a team that projected win total wise, not going to be very good this year. And if they're not good, they're probably going to see some negative game scripts. That should play into Preston Williams' favor. So if you project Preston Williams to maintain his target share last year, which would put him at a 20% target share, he's almost a lock to see 100 plus targets. And you're getting him in the double-digit rounds right now. So I think he's a massive, massive, massive value.
I mean, he's being drafted around guys like Jalen Reagor, Mike Williams, Anthony Miller, Sammy Watkins, Justin Jefferson, Antonio Brown, who's not even on a team right now. So like, yeah, I agree with you. Possible breakout here for a guy who can get down the field, who does have talent, and in a team that's going to throw the ball a lot, as we saw last year from Miami. A lot of DFS tournaments were won by just stacking both sides of Miami games. So because their team would have to play catch up and the other team would put up points because their defense can't stop anybody. So a lot of good names there. DK Metcalf, Terry McLaurin, Michael Gallup, Marquise Brown, Deontay Johnson, Preston Williams, all at value, which kind of allows you to draft your running backs early, load up on these stud second-year wide receivers in the middle rounds, draft a quarterback late, as JJ always tells us to do.
Should be doing that.
And then win your leagues, guys. It's not all that hard. Boom, you got the recipe. You know how to do it. Go check out JJ on Twitter at Late Round QB. Go listen to his podcast, the Late Round Podcast, and the Living the Stream podcast, which is required reading during the season. And if it's not, you're doing it wrong. JJ, thank you for joining us again.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, not a problem. Guys, thank you for being here. Go check out one of my other videos, and I'll catch you later. Bye.
He's a legend.